Hey, good afternoon, everyone. It is the top of the hour, so we'll get started here. Welcome. And I imagine some people will be joining here throughout the first few minutes. So thanks for everyone who is on so far. Appreciate you joining us today. And you may have, this is the third in our series. So if you've joined the other webinars as well, thanks very much. Today we are talking about more of a private tree care focus and tree plotter. So we have a guest presenter on today that will be focusing on how they are using tree plotter. And so I am Evan Sims. Over there, my picture is on the left there. And I'm with Planet Geo. I am the software sales director, and today guest presenting with us is Brian Gray, who's a track consulting arborist and CTSP with Schneider Tree Care out of Greenville, South Carolina. And they serve a larger area in the Carolinas. And he will be sharing, they've been a tree plotter client for some time and are really great at leveraging the tool in many different aspects in their business. And have really integrated the tool of tree plotter into their business. And so I asked them to share today and give us a little insight. And they were very very nice to share, kind of open up and share their business strategy and how they're using the tool effectively to add value to their clients. So, thanks again to Brian for hopping on today. And so again, I mentioned that this is one of our winter webinar series, and this is the third one of the series today. So yesterday we had Tree Plotter and Parks Plotter by Ian Hanau, and the City of Davis was a guest presenter there, Martin from the City of Davis. On Tuesday, there was Jeremy and Ian presented on tree canopy assessments, so another wing of our company on that one. And if you've missed those are all, we post all the recordings of all of our webinars, past webinars, at planetgeo.com/webinars. You can also navigate that from the Tree Plotter website as well at resources. And those all have CEUs attached to them, so if you view the webinar, we have a recording of that, we have a log of that, and we can, at the end of that, you can submit the CEU code for viewing past webinars. So who is Planet Geo? Our company, so our product, the main product we're talking about today is our software product of Tree Plotter. Which is our flagship product, but we also provide other services. So that our company as Planet Geo, as you can see, software is one aspect of our company, but we also provide other urban forestry services. So we provide tree inventory services, boots on the ground, collecting tree inventory data. We also provide the geospatial analysis, so land cover and GIS canopy assessments, and that's really what the Tuesday's webinar was focused on. And we also provide consulting services, providing management and master plans, typically on a government level, but we've also served some other entities with that as well. And so I'll just give a quick introduction on what Tree Plotter is, because that's kind of the tool we are talking about today. And so this software, the kind of 30,000 foot level view of what this tool is and the aspects, the platform itself, it is a GIS and map-based program, allowing you to map and inventory trees and collect information about each tree. So you can plot those assets directly on the map, which we are also plotting other aspects. Part of the webinar yesterday for Parks Plotter, showing some of the additional elements that can be plotted. So in our tool, GPS is not necessarily required. You can map directly on or you can plot trees and other assets directly on the base map. You can choose from several different base maps. It's web browser based, so there's no software to download. You're always accessing the software through a web browser, through a URL. And it's also cloud hosted, which means that all the data is saved in the cloud, and so that anyone that's accessing the map is viewing the real-time data up to date at that point. There's also mostly online capabilities, but we also have offline capabilities for those areas that are poor reception or sometimes can speed up some production and collecting information if you're offline. Because our service is web-based, you can view the software and interact with the software on any mobile device, whether it's Android or iOS, phone or tablet. It all operates very, very much the same as if you were on a desktop, just a slightly smaller screen, and the software is mobile optimized for mobile use. And then we are on a subscription-based system, so you're purchasing ongoing subscription that has numerous benefits like ongoing updates and features that are added to the software, and those are just pushed automatically to you over the web. And it's highly customizable, and that's one of the things that most of our users enjoy, is that you can really create a customized tool quite easily by tweaking some data collection elements very easily, and make the tool fit to your needs or to your particular niche in arboriculture and urban forestry. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Brian in just a minute, and just a couple housekeeping items. We do have a chat, both a chat and a Q&A section. So you'll see in your view that you can put either questions or comments in the chat or in the question and answer section. Either one will work. For the most part, we're going to hold all questions till the end. We're going to try to leave about at least 10 minutes at the end for questions and a little bit more information. So feel free to chat or hold any questions, and I can address any issues in the chat as Brian is presenting. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and allow Brian to start sharing his screen. And Brian, thanks again for presenting, and take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Evan. Can you hear me good?
We can hear you well. Thank you.
Awesome. Move this down to the bottom of the screen. All right. I appreciate it, Evan. And I appreciate everybody kind of joining in here today. This is my first webinar, so I'm super excited to be presenting in here. So one of the things that we've done here at Schneider Tree Care is we really have kind of, like Evan said, incorporated the inventory into basically our list of services, and basically it's kind of it's helped us actually grow a lot of the different sections of our business. So whether that be general tree care, the pruning and removal, or the tree and shrub care. So the biggest thing that I wanted to kind of talk about today is how is that a win for everybody? How does using technology help everybody win, especially in the world of arboriculture? So, starting with the client, obviously, because we want to serve the client. This is one of the reasons that we're in business, is to serve the client, right? So how can we bring value to the client and at the same time still make us money, still make the company money? Because in all reality, that's what we're in business for. And also you, obviously, because as you start to bring this software, and as you start to bring this service, if you're not already doing this, bringing this kind of service to your company is only going to help your bottom line and kind of help you move forward as a company. So that's kind of what I want to talk about today. And, I'm going to kind of go through, what does an ideal client look like? Kind of what we see from our perspective, what does that client look like? And then from a company and maybe like an arboriculture standpoint, how do we actually go out and meet these people? And then also, what are we actually using the software for? So that's kind of what I'm going to go through today. And like Evan said, if you have any questions, let us know. So we'll kind of get started. So the first thing you want to do is define your ideal client. So what does that look like what does an ideal client look like for you and for your company? Because not everybody is going to be a good client for tree inventory. You know, it's going to be a very specific person. It's going to be a very specific budget that people have to be able to use to be able to have a specific budget for their trees. So our typical ideal clients that we're dealing with, what is their pain? So when I say pain, what do I mean by that? What do they get out of bed every day and say, holy smokes, I hate going to work today because I have to deal with these trees because of this reason. Maybe they deal with a large section of trees. Maybe they're working on a college campus. What is their pain that they have to get up every day and say, I can't deal with this thing one more day? Maybe they have trees consistently dying, or maybe they're having healthcare issues on the trees, or maybe they're having hazard issues. One of the inventories that we did a couple of years back was on a college campus here in the upstate of South Carolina. And one of the board members of the college there was jogging down the main road, and a huge limb came down and almost hit them right in the head. So at that point, trees became a huge issue, right? So we were able to go through and we inventoried all the trees and started to put them on a removal and replacement plan. So that automatically became their pain. They said, we don't want any more accidents. We need to curb our liability that we have. So what is their budget? You know, if the client doesn't have the money to pay for it, you don't really have a client. Obviously, one of the biggest things that I will probably repeat a lot is that inventory services are not something you should just be giving away. This is a lot of raw data that you're collecting, a lot of time that you're spending on a project, on a site. So what is the budget that this client has for this? Do they have the money to be able to pay for your services? And how do they make a decision? So are they the only person on the site that makes the decision that says, you know, we can absolutely make this decision today. I'll sign on the dotted line. Or do they say that, and actually what they have to do is go back and talk to their board member and say, we need to have the discussion. We can't approve this kind of service until we go back to the board and everybody approves it. So figuring out those three things is kind of the biggest thing that makes up your ideal client. What is their pain? What is their budget? How are they going to, and how do they also make a decision?
Hey, Brian,
Yep.
just out of curiosity, in your experience, do you find that there are kind of more, consistent pains that are more apt to a particular market segment? Like, for example, does the residential clients seem to have a unique set of pains versus, say, a municipal client?
Yeah. So, you know, a municipal government or maybe even a commercial client, they're going to have a lot of different issues that they're dealing with. Typically, they don't have the manpower, especially on the commercial or the municipal side. There's also going to be really tight budget restrictions with working with them usually. And they might have the knowledge to deal with the issues that are going on, but they need some kind of contractor, some kind of person to come in and kind of take care of that for them. On the residential side, what we've seen is the client or the homeowner, they love their trees, but they really don't know what they're doing with them. And maybe they have enough that they really need to manage their trees. So that's where you're going to kind of have this mentality where they want you to come in and just take care of things for them. And like I said, again, that's going to come down to their budget and kind of how they make a decision. So that's a good question, because defining their pain, making sure they have a budget, and then figuring out how they make their decision is probably one of the biggest three things. So moving on, you know, what is our typical, where are we actually getting the inventories from? Who are we selling the inventories to? We work a lot with property managers. So with apartment complexes, and even some large HOA residential, where there's a lot of houses basically. We're going to be working with them to be able to manage all their trees on site. And so we're going to be working with property managers to help them manage their trees, also commercial site managers. So if they work with a large industrial site, we'll be actually helping them as well. So we work with a lot of large companies where they have a lot of parking lot island trees, a lot of trees up next to large buildings. And so the whole thing is controlling liability and controlling the budget. We also have done some work with the municipal government, and that's where we're going to see if we've seen a few things come in from that. We don't specialize in that because typically municipal government inventories are on a lot larger scale. High-end residential, we have quite a few of those. And those are people who they really care about their trees, but they just don't know how to do it. And they don't know what to do or how to move forward. And then landscape architects. So a lot of times we'll see people come in, they want to build a house on an existing site with existing trees, and they really want to be as really environmentally friendly as possible. And they want to be able to put that house in between some trees or on a forested site. They want to leave the best ones and take the ones that aren't so healthy or maybe hazardous away so that they can put the house there and have a really nice place to put their house. Those are the ones that we are typically dealing with. Evan, I don't know if you have anything different from that.
Yeah, I think all ones that we serve as well. I would just add probably school campus, which can be anywhere from, a primary school to college and university campus. A lot of campuses have a great focus on their urban forests. And we also find that within that segment, a good kind of indication or a good list to start with is the Tree Campus USA. So I'm not sure if everyone knows at least about Tree City USA, run through the Arbor Day Foundation, but they also have a Tree Campus USA program in which they can apply for. And for us, that is a good starting point that is indicating these college campuses care about their urban forest and want to manage and share the benefits with everyone. So I would add that school campus segment in there.
Yeah, and I guess I should have realized that because we actually did an inventory in Charlotte, North Carolina, for that very reason, so that one of the local colleges there could actually participate in that Trees Campus USA. And so the first step, if you go on Trees Campus USA website, the first step is that they have to have a tree inventory. So it really works out. It really works out well in that situation. So, so moving on, where are we actually finding these people? One of the things that we like to say is keep the product top of mind. So whether you're talking about tree inventory or whether you're talking about, whatever your company's niche is, whatever you do the best, keep that product top of mind as you're, talking with clients or potential clients. And in our case, we keep our antenna up for people who have the pain of managing a large site or people that fall into that typical inventory client kind of thing. And we will, we always bring that up as an option. And really, we say this a lot too, is it really relationship. This is where some of our best client and most long-term clients have come from, that we're able to serve on a regular basis. So managing those relationships, and following through on your promises, showing up on time, doing what you say you're going to do. Those are the things that are going to build that relationship with that property manager or with the municipal government person or even the commercial site managers. That's where most of our inventories come from, and most of the people that want to make the decision about an inventory comes from. So where does the value come from for the actual client? So we're doing all this for a purpose. Where does the client actually get value from? So through the software, like Evan was saying earlier, creating access. One of the things that we do is we give all of our the people that we do the inventory for, we give them all basically a read-only login. So they can actually log into the website. They can see their trees. They can see what information that we've collected. They can't change any data, but they are able to go through and actually kind of grab hold of this thing that they've just purchased. And I think that's a huge thing with a lot of people, is being able to really create access, creating this this basically forest in a cloud where they can kind of see what's going on out there. They can sit in an office all day and know that they have a tree right outside their window, but what's going on the other side of campus? The information is updated real time. So as if somebody's out collecting information, or you're in the middle of the project and you're actually trying to collect the information and see the information, the client can actually see what's being collected, where are the hazards that are out on their site. All this information will come through real time, just because it's operated by the cloud. And there's also a history portion that is updated. So they're able to go back through as the site manager. You're able to enter the history of the trees that you've actually worked on. So what work have we done to this specific tree over the last however many years you've been working on this site? So they can go back through and kind of see all that history. So like I said, visible reference, you can, instead of just saying, we need to cut these trees down, or we need to fertilize all these trees along this road, it gives you a visible reference for the people who are actually making the decision to buy. So beyond just purchasing the actual initial inventory, being able to log in, see where these trees are, see how these trees actually are affecting this building or maybe this sidewalk. Being able to log on and see that information makes a huge world of difference, because a lot of people are visual. They like to be able to see what's going on. So it gives you that visual reference across the entire campus. Once the inventory is completed and you're actually working with them on a management plan or on a service plan, budget management comes into play. So finding out what their budget was, like we talked about in the beginning, and then helping them work through all the different factors that can affect your site, as far as, do we need to remove the trees away from the building? Do we need to create sidewalk clearance? Do we need to do some plant health care to keep everything healthy and disease and insect free as much as possible? Using their budget to the best of their ability and helping them decide on, maybe they don't need to remove this tree that's way at the back of the property because nobody ever goes back there, but we definitely need to remove the deadwood out of these trees over the sidewalk. That'll make a huge difference on how they spend their money, and they're feeling that value from making sure they're not wasting their money. And like I've said a bunch of times, hazard control, we, on a lot of our inventories and a lot of our where we're actually running current management plans, controlling hazards on a site, as far as dead limbs, trees that could potentially fall. I remember one time I was down in Charleston doing inventory, and I was about 300 trees in, and I came across, it was at a retirement community, and I came across an old hickory tree that looked dead-ish from across the way. It was in kind of a center courtyard area, and when I got up to it, I realized that there were some conchs around the base, and then there was actually one on the trunk. And then on closer inspection, as I went to put the tag on the tree, I realized that there was actually a horizontal crack that was almost 40% of one side of the tree. So being able to find that, we were able to get a crew out there the next day, because as far as from a risk assessment standpoint, that was a highly trafficked area in a retirement community, and it was in one of the main meeting spots. That tree needed to be removed like 2 weeks before I got there. So being able to identify those hazards, come to them and say, this is a huge amount of liability for you. Let's get this taken out. And then those people are able to move forward. And that, again, that just further improves the relationship. So what does all this kind of create for you? It creates long-term clients, really, because the more you're working with somebody, the more you're building that relationship, you are able to get in deeper with the site managers. They're only going to use you for different services. Maybe you start out the inventory process, you're going to go through and inventory everything, and then at first you might just be doing the pruning on site. Well, as it goes along, they notice that you respond consistently every time to their issues. And so now they use you for their removals, and they also use you for their pruning, and now they use you for their plant health care because they can't get the other company to respond. So you end up deepening the relationship. You can add more services. You're able to create that client that's going to stick around for 5, 10, 15, 20 years instead of just a one and done tree removal. New business. So as you are developing these management plans, as you're developing these relationships, you have to remember that just like we're in the associations like ISA or the TCIA, there is a lot of associations that these folks are a part of. And so they're going back and they're telling their buddies that have traveled in, hey, I got this guy you need to meet. They're complaining about the same things at their conferences. So they're having the same conversations that we have. So being able to get our name passed around as somebody that will show up and do the right thing, that's what creates that new business. Creating that relationship will help develop that new business kind of from an organic standpoint, which is really the best kind. And reproducible income. Like I said, a lot of information and a lot of time is spent on, let's go and do a removal on this client site. And I think removals are super important. Tree care is super important. The only thing is that once they've paid the bill, there's really no more income that can come from that property. So what a inventory and a management plan does for you, it allows you to help the client realize what kind of pruning he needs on a yearly basis, what kind of plant healthcare needs he has on a yearly basis. And it helps you kind of move forward and get that monthly, quarterly income from the client using their budget. So that kind of creates work that lasts all year round. So how are you actually creating the income? Like I said, you have the initial cost of the inventory. I have heard of people giving away the inventory software. We'll go and do this inventory if you, maybe if you give us all the prunings or all the removals. The inventory is a professional service. One of the things that we like to say around here is that we're a professional company that just happens to do tree care. So if we were to go to a lawyer's office or some other professional office today, they're going to charge you for even a CPA. It's tax time, right? So if you're going to go into that CPA's office, they're going to charge you an hourly rate for the information that they know. So why, as an industry, would we want to give away all of our information that we know for free? So, be charging for that initial cost of the inventory. I've seen inventory prices anywhere from $2 a tree to $12 a tree. So I don't know, Evan, if you've seen anything different from that, lower, higher. I don't know if you've seen anything different, but that's typically what I've seen.
Yeah, it certainly ranges, and for us, it's a matter of that level of assessment. How deep of an assessment are we doing on each tree that kind of drives that cost up or down?
Yep. Yeah, that's where we're at too. So, we'll try to, how long are you going to spend looking at that tree is really what it comes down to. So after the initial cost of the inventory, then you're going to drive into that pruning and removal. And like I said, You're going to then create a management plan for the site. You'll be able to set up the prunings and the removals as you go. And then also more tree and shrub care work, more plant health care work. So obviously the main goal is to keep everything as healthy as possible, right? If you don't have to remove it and you don't have to prune it, the next best thing is to keep that tree or shrub as healthy as possible so it stays around as long as possible. Keep it as insect free as possible. Obviously, we're not going for eradication. If somebody tells you that they can eradicate all the bugs on a site, then you probably need to find a different plant health care provider. But that's a whole nother webinar, I would assume. So basically, this is kind of the second part of how we actually use the software, what it actually looks like for us to go out and do inventories, and kind of some of the types of inventories, that we've already kind of been mentioning a little bit, and how we're actually using those. So we'll kind of jump right in. So what we like to call at Schneider Tree Care, like a full service inventory, and really this is the collection of all the data on a site of all the trees that are basically need to be managed. So as you see in this picture there, this is a 2,500 tree site down in Charleston, South Carolina, and this site is only growing. There's a whole another wooded section that we've already done site surveys on, and now we're gonna be able to start going in as they develop that site and inventory those trees. So full service inventory is actually going out to the site, tagging the trees, putting a number, giving that tree a name, identifying the tree, how big is it, how tall is it, what insect or disease problems does it currently have, what kind of work, does it need a root collar excavation, does it need some sort of growth regulator because it's close to a building, what kind of work can we do to this tree at this time? Maybe it's got a giant dead hanger in it that we need to take out. Marking all those things on a full service inventory is one of the main things that we do. So from that inventory, once you've kind of collected all that data, you can go through and kind of evaluate where you're at on the site. You can create that management plan so you can move forward, year after year, and hopefully manage those trees for that client so they're not losing them all the time. You're going to be working with their budget. Like I said earlier, they're going to have a number in mind that they know that they can spend on trees. And instead of spending it all on removals every year because they're not doing anything, keeping the trees and shrubs as healthy as possible is one of the main things that we preach to everybody. So working with that budget, helping them use it the right way and the best way. It also creates ease of communications and future development and planning. And we'll kind of go through some of these here real quick. So on a commercial inventory, this is the main portion where you're going to start creating that management plan. Typically for us, and what we've seen is that typically the first year is the most expensive for a client. So if you can get through the first year, usually they will be, you'll be able to back off on their budget and they'll be able to spend less as they go. So in this first year, they're getting the inventory set up. They're controlling all the hazards. They're removing the trees that need to be removed. It's always going to be your first year is the most expensive. Hazard mitigation, I know I've said it a lot, but it really goes back to the liability of things. Hazard mitigation should be done in the first year of the management plan, if possible. That's how we usually set up our management plans. So trees that are over sidewalks, close to buildings, controlling that hazard and making sure that nobody's going to get hit in the head with a limb or a tree is going to snap in half and fall into the courtyard of this retirement community. Those are the things that need to be taken care of first, and then after that we can use their budget wisely throughout the property. And we schedule pruning throughout the year. So obviously, there's a lot of scientific evidence that says you should only prune this time, you should only prune this time. That's really, really good, except that sometimes when you're doing production pruning, you can't always rely on the weather or the timing. So we schedule our pruning throughout the year. And, that way we can spread this large, very large, many cases, scope of work. We can spread that scope of work over several months, quarterly, or even every 6 months, depending on the site. So, and the other thing that we put into our management plans after we've done an inventory is tree and shrub care services. So keeping the trees as healthy as possible, treating for insect and disease problems as they arise, trying to keep everything as healthy and disease-free as possible. In that, we are, we're not just going to go and cover spray everything. We're not going to go and dump a bunch of fertilizer on something if it doesn't need it. So understand the use of IPM, understand phenology, growing degree days, know when to time out your applications so that you're doing that at the right time, and write that into your management plan. Let your clients know when you're going to be there. And then through this management plan, scouting on site should be done, making sure, visiting the site with the client multiple times throughout the year is going to help you not only, like I said, build that relationship deeper, but it's also going to help you see any issues that are going on, or maybe any hazards that have presented themselves. So after you've set up the inventory, you've completed all the inventory, you've gathered the data, and you know what should be done first based off the hazards. You're able to use all the tools that Tree Plotter has in it, all the filter tools and whatnot, using that data to go back to the client and say, all right, let me spread all this out in front of you and show you what you have going on your site. How much money do you want to allocate to this? How much money do you want to allocate to this? And really diving down and saying, let's take care of these things first, and maybe in 2 years we'll work on that thing, or maybe in 1 year we'll work on that thing. So prioritize the work that needs to be done, based on the site needs and based on the relationship. Over the next 1, 2, 3, 5, however many years, you can prioritize that out. Work with that client so you're able to figure out what needs to come next. So communication, one of the biggest things with this is really just don't just visit the site one time and then peace out and never go back and visit. So keeping that communication, keeping the lines of communication clear and open with your site contacts is going to be super helpful. A lot of times what our arborists are doing is actually scheduling time out to do either weekly or monthly visits. Because when a site is big enough, things are always changing, and they change quickly. Maybe after a big storm event, or maybe after some random weather that came through, the site could change. And so keeping an eye on it weekly or monthly, depending on how large the site is and basically the needs of your site contact, is going to be super important. And also the client has access to the inventory. So if you're giving that client a login and they're driving around by themselves at some point, or we've seen this before where a client has logged into their site and they reference a specific tree number or a specific tree, where you're able to talk the same language about whatever tree you're looking at, because you can pull up the same inventory that the client has in front of them. So it really works out. It works out to the benefit of both of you, because the client is able to talk in the same language, kind of the same kind of jargon that you can, and you guys can have a really good conversation about what's going on. So one of the things that we do as well is we do residential inventories. So this is kind of a case study, I guess, if you will, about a large, this was for a large client that we had down in one of our offices. And he has basically a 25 or 30 acre site, I can't remember. And he wants to manage these trees on the site and keep this as pristine as possible. He's more of a set it and forget it kind of guy. he doesn't really want to have to worry about it. He owns multiple car stores, and he wants to be able to just say, you worry about the trees, I'll write the checks, and we'll go from there. But so he kind of wants that set it and forget it kind of tree care. So he has a large quantity of mature trees that all needed some kind of work. So this is a very old property down in Anderson, South Carolina. And the trees had obviously been there for a long time. It was old farm country. And he had a lot of trees that he wanted to take care of. And they all needed work, that none of them had been pruned for a long time. Some of the ones that were up close to the house had a lot of dead wood. They were over the driveway and everything like that. So we were able to identify that and kind of, manage that for the client. And then also the scope of work for our crew leaders, the scope of work was spread out over a very large area. So being able to say to the crew leader in the morning, I need you to go prune trees number, 25 to 35 or whatever they were working on for that day, being able to have a clear, open line of communication with your crew leader and write that on the work order. It allows you to cut down calls when they drive 50 minutes from your office and get to a site with a bucket truck and a chip truck and a chipper. And they finally get to the site and now they're trying to call you, and you're in a sales meeting or a sales call. And so it just really slows down communication when there's not clear communication. If there's not clarity, things get confusing quickly. So we use that inventory to schedule out that scope of work, and we were able to get all the work done for the client. So another way that we use the tree plotter software is through large job planning. So this was a job, and it really, before I go into that, it provides clarity for the scope of work. It promotes efficiency during production. And it really provides, again, the clear communication lines between everybody that's involved with it. And one of the jobs that we worked on was for a municipality in our area, and we were able to work with them. One of the things that we bid on the job was a very large scope of work, but the inventories for the area that we were working in were 25 years old. And like I said at the beginning, a lot of times municipalities don't have the budgets or the manpower to be able to update consistently their inventories. So before we started the scope, or before we started the work, we were able to go through and inventory all 400 trees that were in the scope of work and plan out our days of work, both on the tree and shrub care side and the general tree care side. And obviously with municipalities, you're bidding on razor thin margins, because they're not necessarily worried about the relationship. They're really more worried about what it's going to cost the city and the taxpayers. So being able to be as efficient as possible and know that we can be as efficient as possible is really where we benefited from doing that inventory ourselves. And like I said, it was a large scope of work. It was 400 trees spread out over about 5 miles of Main Street. And we were able to split the work down into 40 days based off of site maps, aerial maps that we collected with inventory. We were able to schedule out certain trees to be pruned on certain days. We were able to schedule out certain trees to be root collar excavated on certain days. And that way also our crews weren't working in the same area, because it's impossible to do a root collar excavation and prune a tree at the same time. So making sure that we weren't stepping all over each other at the same time was super important. So like I said, there's lots of factors in play too, because being the fact that it was the main street of the town, there's a lot of not only pedestrian traffic, but vehicular traffic. So our ability to do work was limited from 5 in the morning till 11, right before lunch, 11 a.m. So those factors come into play in being as efficient as possible as well. So making sure that when you're out on site, you're actually getting stuff done and not wasting a bunch of time trying to figure out where we're supposed to go. And that actually proved itself out. The first year, or the year that we did this, was our most efficient year. And all the years before that, we had kind of winged it based off of what we felt like was going to be the next best trees to work on the next day. And what it usually was just a lot of controlled chaos. So that job actually went really well for us. So one of the other ways, and that we use the inventory software is for site surveys. So site surveys are used mainly on we don't use them a lot in our Greenville office, but in our Charleston office and along the our coastal markets, we use the site surveys because the tree ordinances are a lot more strict. So Evan, I don't know what the tree ordinance is out there, but it in Greenville, it's not super strict, and we're able to kind of clear a site or work on a site without seeing what's there. Whereas with our coastal towns, before we can even start site work, they have to get a site survey. So I don't know what it's like out there, but
yeah, I think, and I'm out on the West Coast, and it's kind of hit or miss even out here. A lot of times California is viewed as a bit progressive, but still it's kind of hit or miss by municipality. But I would say certainly the trend is progressing towards an awareness of in municipalities and other government, local government entities, an awareness on the importance of trees in their cities and protecting them in development, and recognizing that development can be the biggest threat to a decreased tree canopy. And so I'm certainly seeing more and more municipalities adopting code and bylaws that are protecting trees development and actually requiring an arborist survey to be done as part of the permitting process. So that's a good thing to see for our urban forestry efforts, and also from a business standpoint, that this can certainly create a lot of demand for arborist surveys and arborist reports.
Yep, I think it's starting to become, especially as we move towards as our millennials maybe age or whatever is going on. But I think we're definitely moving towards more and more municipalities adopting these. We're actually working with Greenville City on adopting more strict tree ordinances, because right now it's really just it's really not required to do anything. So this is one of the ways that we work with the developers and landscape architects, especially in those areas, because we're able to go and do the site surveys, do the and talk in their language. So we're able to, and I know, Evan, you said you guys were kind of working on that, and we're moving more towards that. So that's one of the ways that we use the site surveys and provide, accurate data, printed maps. That's what all the landscape architects and developers are looking for as we move forward with that. Site development, another thing that we've used it for is to actually go through and inventory the current trees that are on a site, and then plan out, especially with the help of landscape architects, plan out how we're going to move forward and how we're going to remove and replace the existing trees that are on the site. They've just become too hazardous. They've become too large and mature for the area. So let me give you a visual reference of how we are going to remove trees and replace them, and what kind of trees are we actually going to replace them with. So this is another way that we actually will work with our clients in that way. So that is, like I said, that's what I have for today. My name is, I really appreciate Evan giving me this opportunity. My name is Brian. One of the things that I did want to mention, too, was that I mentioned plant healthcare a lot. We actually work with a lot of plant healthcare here in Greenville, South Carolina. Like I said, we've been in business for about 20 years. And one of the things that we've done is develop a franchise opportunity. And so typically it's not right for everybody, but typically we work with people who are frustrated with their current PhD program, or maybe they're unsure of how to even start a good plant healthcare program. So if you kind of fall into either one of those categories, visit us at the website there or email me for more information, and we can definitely go through that. But again, I really appreciate it. If you have any other questions, definitely let us know. And so, Evan, I guess I will stop sharing this and let you take over.
Yeah, thanks very much, Brian. I think that was really, really informative, and a good kind of peek into how you guys are leveraging not only the tool of Tree Plotter, but the concept and the approach that you guys are using. I think is really interesting, and obviously proving effective for your business at the same time. So thanks again for sharing that. We have time. There are some questions queued up that I was leaving. I was answering a couple of them, but there's a couple questions, and I think we can answer. So one of the questions was looking for advice on preparing quotes, both in respect to, if you're proposing an inventory quote and you don't know how many trees are there, but you're proposing a per tree price. How do you kind of communicate or develop that quote with the client?
So one of the things, like I said, is going back to that budget. One of the conversations that we have to him is say, I see a lot of trees on the site. It looks like you could potentially be anywhere from, $3,000 to $4,000, or $15,000 to $20,000 for the data collection on this inventory. Is there a number that you want to stay around? And then we kind of drive down and collect that many trees, based off of how much data we're collecting. Like I said, give them a per tree price, but we're not going to go over this amount of trees, or we're not going to go over this budget item.
Yeah, I think we kind of do a similar thing in a lot of ways, and just set a not to exceed price, or even have different levels of assessment sometimes. So here's a basic inventory, here's a higher level inventory, and what are estimated, looking at what's on the property, either from an aerial standpoint or a walkthrough, kind of guesstimate about how many trees. And then sometimes if the client is really worried about the price running away from them, setting that either the not to exceed is important, or a check-in periodically, quarter of the way or halfway through the project on, well, this is how much of the property we've gotten to, and then checking in with them and saying, would you like us to continue and do the full inventory or limit ourselves? So definitely, yep. It's just an important communication aspect, and understanding their budget too. If they're trying to stick within a particular budget, finding the right solution.
Yep.
So there was also another question here about your regular visits. You mentioned that you do these weekly, monthly, quarterly visits, and just curious about how are you charging, or are you charging for those kind of periodic inspections throughout the year?
No, typically not. So basically, we really look at that as like 1 hour or 30 minutes to spend with the client. And like I said, that's also, the regularity of the visit, whether it's weekly, monthly, or whatever, is going to really depend on really how much management are we doing on their property? So how much are they spending per year? Do they need to be visited every week? So one of the sites that we manage in Charleston, we are out there every week because there's always something new going on. It's a very heavy wooded site, and it's also under development currently. So we visit them every week. There's another inventory that we did up in Charlotte. They meet once a quarter. And even though it's a large inventory that we did over the entire over several campuses, the the site supervisor doesn't feel like he needs to have as much hand holding, and he's okay with kind of identifying problems. And so we've kind of come to that agreement. But again, it really, just like the budget, it goes back to communication. How often does that client need to be communicated with? And you really, how much they mean to the company.
Yep. Great. Thank you. Thank you, Brian. I think I've gotten all or most of the questions answered so far that I've seen. If I've missed one, you can put a question in the chat or repost either in the question section or the comment section. I just wanted to mention a couple comments that I've gotten just to clarify. So one of the attendees brought up the fact that I don't know if we misspoke, but I do want to make this clear that the Tree Campus USA or the Tree City USA, one of the requirements are relatively low for those two cities or campuses to apply and get to be a Tree Campus or Tree City, and that inventory is not a requirement for a campus or city to apply to that program. And so I apologize if we misspoke or misled you in that. And that's why we like to view those lists, because they are indicating that they have an importance on trees, but that they may need additional help in inventories or management plans or pruning plans or actual contracted tree work. So I just wanted to make that clarification. There was also another great comment if you missed it in the panel about how can you protect trees as far as site development? How can you protect the trees if you don't know what's there first? So that's a great nail on the head. We say that all the time. You need to know what you have in order to manage it. So that's why inventories are really important, and also having that tool of that's easy to use in the field, easy to map and quickly map, so that you can really economically charge for that service that will be affordable to that client. And then one other note, we are expanding our capabilities in CAD, because most of the developers and engineers, the language they speak is CAD in developing their plans and submitting permits. And so we are expanding our capabilities in the CAD realm of importing CAD and exporting CAD layers, so that you can, the arborist can deliver a product that more suits the needs of those developers and engineers in a very efficient way. So look out for future development in the coming year on CAD aspects. I just want to mention we have a couple of resources up here. Treeplotter.com is a great resource. Existing users and anyone else really, we have a great support site that shows a lot of tutorials and videos on the tool TreePlotter. We also have an open demo app, so that pg-cloud.com TP demo, you can explore the actual tool and try it out for yourself. And then we have on our issue all of our management plans, reports, and iTree studies that you can view. And then here's just, again, our quick contact. So my name and number and email, and Brian's information there that he shared as well. And ultimately, you can get a hold of any of us through the TreePlotter or Planet Geo website as well.